And then, yes, of course, there is evidence, more evidence. And in the Big 12, TCU continues to remain unbeaten. Kansas State took the heart and soul away from Oklahoma State. Shocking that it was like that. And then Baylor went into Lubbock and handled things very, very soundly, 45-17. And Oklahoma has just turned the corner. That's who Baylor plays this week after the win up in Ames, Iowa.
Well, Oklahoma State decided to dress up all as ghosts for Halloween on Saturday because Kansas State ran right through them like they weren't even there. That was unbelievable. And another crazy, crazy week in the Big 12. And it wasn't really a crazy week in any other conference. I mean, most everything went, how most people thought it would. The Big 12 just continues to show why it's the deepest and most competitive conference maybe in the country this year because you don't know what's going to happen week to week. Look, Baylor beating Tech is not surprising that they won the game, but surprising that they changed the identity of who they've been in the previous 7 games to go and do it.
Craig, were they the identity we thought they were going to be when we saw this season turning the corner to start back in September?
Yeah, I think that was closer to it. I think that, being able to run the ball pretty much at will and kind of, pave people with that offensive line, that RVO that you were looking for all year long has kind of peaked its head up at times, and it was in full effect on Saturday night. I mean, Richard Reese was at the head of it, but that offensive line did a great job of just kind of dictating things and opening up holes and they, as an offense, really controlled the pace of that game from start to finish, and that was one of the bigger parts of why that score turned out the way that it did. The 5 interceptions also played into that. The success in the run game played into that, but the time of possession and just being able to control the football and then rip it away from Tech every time they had it, seemingly. All of that amounted to a blowout that I didn't see coming. I mean, I think that we saw that game playing out more as a close type of shootout contest. That first quarter was 3-0, and not at all, I think, what was expected. And then, after that first quarter, Baylor just kind of hit their stride and did not really look back outside of a little bit of a scare there in the third quarter. So a very promising effort for the Bears. I mean, if they can be that team over the next month, then they can really do some damage. And, I'm not trying to get too far ahead, but they could find themselves in, maybe knocking on the door to Arlington again. But that's easier said than done. They got to take care of Oklahoma first, which is not a guarantee by any means in Norman, but that was a very promising effort for Baylor, much more like the team that we expected. And for Texas Tech, I think that they've obviously got to go look in the mirror and answer some questions. And I think that, the biggest thing coming out of that game is obviously the quarterback room's got to get some clarity on exactly what they want to do there. Because they were just kind of looking for an answer on Saturday night, even though Baron Morton played okay. I mean, I know he threw picks, but he played okay, especially compared to the other two who just came in and threw a pick right away. But I think that was a game that, Texas Tech gets put in that position, a year or two from now, they'll perform much better. That was a little bit too much for them too quick, I think, and Baylor was ready for it.
Yeah, the quarterback situation, and when Shuck came in, you could tell it was almost like a pitcher coming back from Tommy John surgery, which he, of course, is coming off an injury and not getting any kind of rehab assignments. And the first thing was a wounded duck, pick 6. And Baylor's 5 interceptions, 2 by seniors, Walcott and Milton, 2 by freshmen, and 1 by a sophomore. That's what I noticed in the Tevin Williams interception, which I think was equal opportunity in the end zone. You would think like tie goes to the runner, whatever. The official thought differently. And yes, I understand Tevin had most of the leverage, but I was surprised by that. But in the end, 45-17 was what we saw. I'm not saying Baylor is who they were in Lubbock, because we haven't, it was an incredible, nice, and very impressive win. But let's also get into this, and we'll have Dave Aranda one-on-one a little bit after 4. Kansas State beat the living daylights out of Oklahoma State and made them like it. Remember, they were up 28-10 on TCU, and then TCU rallied from behind to win as they continue to remain unbeaten. But Kansas State looked like a juggernaut with what they did at home against Oklahoma State.
Yeah, they were fantastic from the jump, and Oklahoma State, I think it was, and you could even tell by just the vibe on the sideline from the coaches that they kind of maybe felt that if things went south early for them, they weren't going to be able to claw back, because they have been for the last, and it's not just having to grit through against Texas a week ago. The last few weeks have been all really gritty, tough battles, and they've been fighting through injuries. And then this week, Kansas State was just too ready and ran right through them in every single opportunity.
I think it's that, and I think it's slightly more than that. That's the worst loss of the Mike Gundy era, guys. That's the worst loss of his entire tenure on Saturday.
Yeah, it would be hard to get worse.
And it came as a top 10 team, and it came out of complete nowhere to some extent. We knew about their injuries, the number of injuries, the number of guys out, probably needed a little bit more value given to it. I mean, maybe at least on my end, I didn't think they would necessarily plug and play, but they're missing an awful lot of guys, and it wasn't as simple as just plugging and playing guys and overcoming that. But I think the biggest thing is what Mike Gundy talked about in his postgame, and that's the fact that they apparently practice differently.
Yeah, he said that, yeah.
And he would not dive into exactly what that meant, but one could formulate an argument that he might have been referring to them just basically not practicing at all. If you wanted to, you could make it sound like they just practiced like normal. You can make it sound however you want to, because he didn't give enough details other than saying that they basically did some things differently because they were so banged up, and he was worried about them getting further banged up in practice. And so, again, didn't go any farther than that. Read into it how you will, but they changed some things up, and they did it for the worse. And as he said, that that's a lesson that he's got to learn, and something that he miscalculated. But yeah, whatever they did clearly didn't work. I mean, 48-0, that's an embarrassment. And I mean, that just totally shatters not everything for you, but mostly everything now. It's going to be hard to rebound from that. But yeah, big missed opportunity. And for Kansas State, I mean, you got to play who's in front of you, and K-State had this golden opportunity at home when they were limping in a little bit, and you got a wounded duck right there, go for the kill job, and they did it, and they did it quickly, and they didn't look back, and I was mightily impressed. And now you got to look at them as perhaps setting themselves up for a little rematch with TCU, except for this time they might be a bit healthier than they were the last time around. And I'd be all for seeing that, although there's a lot of things to happen over the next month to get to that point. But yeah, mightily impressive by Chris Kleiman and the Cats. Will Howard played his tail off. I mean, so much for, Adrian Martinez being banged up. Will Howard was excellent, and they just dominated that game. That was really impressive.
And they have Texas, who's coming off the off week, along with Kansas this weekend. We'll get into